Chapter 8. Walk. Hard. Abandoned house. Day 3. Dawn. Get up. It's time. Ricky got up. Mortimer saw that Ricky was awake and hopped onto him to ride on his shoulder. We have to go. Ricky paused for a thought, but there was none. I don't know where, but we have to go. Ricky cracked an MRE and shared it with Mortimer. No food here. We have to move on. Once they had their share of the proceeds, Ricky threw the package into the corner where it was immediately devoured by several rats. A few rats came up to Ricky that had their tails tangled up, and he untangled the tails for them. They scurried back off, happy to be separated again. All set? No answers or response, so he went with his potted plant in hand. No nibbles taken out of it, as the rats knew better than to eat his precious chamomile and lavender plants. Ricky intently listened and heard the sounds of farm equipment from many miles away, as there was nothing to drown the sound out. Ricky looked around and saw pits of burned dead rats. He saw wood with bite marks in it. He was in the outskirts of an empty town and debated walking towards civilization. What would I say? Hi, my name is Ricky. I came from the city, and I'm not here to hurt you. They might not understand the difference between brown rats and black rats. They might have cats or dogs. They might even try to shoot at him, thinking he's a marauder or looking for handouts or a scout. Ricky had a better idea. He would walk around the settlement and position himself on the other side, so instead of walking towards civilization, he walked to the next barren and abandoned city. It took nearly all day, passing a giant airstrip, but he finally made it. At some point, he thought he heard some people on motorcycles drive by on the freeway, but he was on the highway, so he didn't see him. He knew better than to stay on the main roads unless there was no other option. Ricky was in a new city, and it was an absolute hellhole, or used to be. Now there wasn't much left, probably for the better. Trailer parks decimated, crack houses falling apart, nobody to be found. The park was destroyed beyond recognition. Very little here to eat. Watch out for needles. Keep getting poked. Glass everywhere. Ricky sensed something behind him but far away, keeping its distance, moving fast by night instead of slow by day. Untrusting but not afraid, measuring and calculating risks, confident but cautious. Ricky looked around at this dilapidated trash heap masquerading as a city. We can't stay here. It was a dangerous place, broken glass and needles, little in the way of sustenance for rats. The ground itself was corrupted by toxins and would kill any plant placed here for many years to come. The rain eased up, and Ricky looked north and east and thought. He had got past the settlement's northern edge, so this was a good time to go around. The rats spoke of a bridge he needed to cross. That was a freeway bridge. Ricky peered at the bridge that the rats had directed him to. It was the only way across for miles in each direction. The rats assured him that there was nobody for at least a half a mile in each direction. Ricky calculated and figured a sniper could still be covering the bridge from further out or higher up. The sun hadn't completely crested the mountains yet. With the rats' reassurance there was no traps on the bridge, Ricky scuttled across as fast as he could along one edge. Upon completing the crossing, he immediately took cover and concealment again. He felt and saw the brown rats picking up the slack behind him along the edges of the bridge. The bridge had been sporadic with vehicle placement, the bridge not yet being a key component to any entry or exit to a thoroughfare being used. It didn't look like there'd been any firefights on the bridge, but a few of the cars had been shot out. It had appeared to be more of a pleasure than a strategy. Ricky would have been more concerned if there'd been no cover at all. All that was put to rest, though, because Ricky was now safely on the other side of the highway. His next task was to circle around the next local encampment, so he had somewhere more logical and strategic to collect his thoughts. The bridge had been the highway crossing over the freeway, so Ricky didn't have the freeway to worry about anymore. He laid in wait for the rats to catch up with his movements and heard more motorcycles. Ricky scuttled back to where he could see the overpass and saw the bikers heading back to where they'd come from. They looked like a cross between law enforcement and a biker gang. Ricky didn't get the feeling that they were evil, but the bikers definitely presented a presence of authority. He slumped down, his back to the concrete barrier. Where was everyone? What happened? How long have I been in the sewers again? The rats completed their maneuver and began taking up forward positions. It was time to move. There's a path to more food, but it is not safe. There is a path to less food, but it is more safe. Ricky thought. The safe route seemed best. He wanted to position himself far enough away from the encampment to where he wouldn't be perceived as a threat. He scuttled off amongst cover and made his way towards the safe route before the rats would decide for him. Away they went. There was a faint touch of pursuit, although not menacing but curious. Ricky walked throughout the day, more alert than usual. There were hints of a more civilized group here, but unable to maintain. They had to fall further back. The survivors must be at the town nearby that Ricky had been circling around. He was closer now and could tell they definitely had power. Electricity. Ricky could see they'd been working on farms and even getting some fuel. Ricky kept himself a good distance from the farms. He wanted to complete a semi-circle and find a place he could hunker down and blend in. In the meantime, they might not see him as a threat anymore. Maybe someone who they'd never detected who had survived on their own somehow. Then he wouldn't have to worry about being bothered. He could find an abandoned basement somewhere and go back to growing his chamomile and lavender. Chapter 9. Finally some rest. The coming weeks. Ricky and his brown furry friends found a nice little place to settle down. It was nestled between a flooded basin and some nice peaceful people that were happy to escape the flood and only wanted to farm. Ricky couldn't enter in their encampment, of course, but he could definitely stay several blocks out and take care of them as best as he could. He sensed several miles away his darker counterpart also sitting and waiting. She didn't have any sinister motives, only was trying to survive, like him. She covered the other flank. His rats sang a name over and over again. Beninka. Beninka stayed on her side of the outskirts and Ricky stayed on his. There was enough for all of them to scavenge and the rats settled down and everything was as peaceful as it could be, all things considered. Rats could basically eat anything, and they did. None of them minded. In their dreams, Ricky and Beninka kept seeing each other for brief moments. It took a while at first. They both weren't sleeping at the same time at first. Eventually they kept tagging each other at the beginning or end until they naturally harmonized. She was nice company. They understood each other. Ricky liked having someone nearby that understood him, and it helped him sleep better. She wasn't very close, but she was close enough. Chapter 10. Unlikely Visit. Ricky's Spot. Mid-spring. It'd been a few weeks, nothing had happened. Nobody was hunting him. Beninka was over on her spot. Ricky had never seen her in person, only in dreams. He liked to stare at her, usually grinning stupidly or looking hopeful or lost. She didn't mind. She'd preen or fidget with things, then show him them. He would shrug, and she would shrug and toss it away and find something else. This would go back and forth until it was time to wake up. Ricky decided this place was the place he wanted to stay. It was getting warmer outside. His plants were excited to start their spring routine since they'd been exposed to the new climate, and the plants seemed to like it. He found a place that was similar in lighting and angle to where they were back in the sewer, and he dug a hole and set his plants to dirt. The lavender and chamomile would need a few days to rest, and he would make sure they weren't rustled. Ricky had sprinkled some of his wildflower seeds around when he first arrived on the off chance. Turns out that some wildflowers hung around, and there were already several different random kinds of flowers popping up in the backyard near where he'd been hiding out. This made him happy, and he picked a few of the flowers to freshen up with. There were other flowers popping up also, but he left them alone. They didn't have any medicinal purposes that he was familiar with. None of these people had started herb gardens before the collapse, but he was hoping somehow to get one started. His rats hadn't said that they found any yet, but he was sure soon they could be popping up any time. It'd have to be special circumstances, like if they were heirloom or self-reproducing. Obviously, if he got near the stronghold he had scouted out, they would have herbs. He wouldn't dare disrupt their ecosystem. He had to find his own herbs, so he could at least take care of a few remedies himself. Ricky didn't have anything to trade either. He had to sit in his spot and behave himself with his MREs and rat friends, and of course his dreams. The stronghold, of course, wouldn't need his MREs, and he didn't have a ton left. He'd been trying to supplement it with whatever he could find or his rat friends found. They'd found some paper around a metal can they couldn't get into, and they let him know. He opened it up and they'd all share it. Sometimes they'd find an animal, but it'd be far too past healthy for him. The rats would be fine, though, and they appreciated his generosity. They made a good team.